Hi there, my name is Robert Aronson and I have a Facebook page called The Online Pastor, which feel free to join if you want to. We deal with biblical questions, and if you have any questions about what the particular verse of the Bible means, then feel free to post a question and I will do what I can to answer that. I was asked a question and I posted my reply on there. Basically, I'll be talking about this today, but I was asking a question recently about the meaning of a passage in Matthew chapter 24, verses 40 to 41. I'll read it out to you. It says, "Two men will be in the field. One will be taken and one left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and one left." So, what does this mean? Well, it's a well-known passage, often quoted by Bible-believing Christians, but there's also confusion as to when the events mentioned by Jesus in these verses will actually occur. So, to bring these verses into context, Jesus was teaching his disciples about when he would return and what would happen at the end of the world. Now, there are various ideas about the time period in question, but I will address my thoughts clearly on the fact that these events are yet future and relate to the time period generally known as the tribulation. Now, this time period was mentioned also by the Old Testament prophet Daniel, and when he was prophesying about God's dealings with the nation of Israel, he said that there were 70 weeks that were appointed to the nation Israel, and in order to fulfill God's purposes. Now, each week it was worth or equivalent to 7 years, and there was a gap between the 69th week and the 70th week. Now, in between the 69th and 70th week is what we refer to as the church age, or it might go slightly longer than the beginning of the 70th week for the church age. But basically it's the in-between period between the end of the 69th week and the 70th week. Now, and in that time period, God is going to, in the final 70th week, the final week, then God's going to be dealing once again with the Gentiles in judgment, but also once again with the Jewish people, because during that time period and what we refer to as the church age, really God has not been dealing very specifically with the Jewish people, but that time again is coming, and it's coming very, very soon. And so, as I say, it's going to be a time period of judgment on the Gentiles, and where God is dealing with the Jewish people once again. And there are two questions basically that now come out of the text that we were looking at, and that we want to ask, and I've given you the context, and so we'll try and place that within the context in order to give the answer. So, first of all, the question is, well, who was Jesus referring to in this passage? And secondly, when will these events actually take place? So, to answer these two questions, we see from the scripture that the verse 40, the theme of verse 40 is repeated in verse 41, and that is there's going to be a separation of two groups of people, and regardless of gender, it's going to be male or female, it makes no difference. And the context shows that it will be as in the days of Noah, and that's very, very important, because that's when the flood came, and the people were living at the time happily. They were eating and drinking and given in marriage and all those sorts of things, and then sudden destruction came, you see. So the implication is clear that the wicked will perish in judgment and the righteous will be saved from judgment, because that's the analogy of Noah. But who are the wicked then? In the field and grinding at the mill. And who are the righteous, and who is it that is going to be taken away, and who is it that's going to be left? So, broadly speaking, there are two opinions as to when it is that this 7-year period, as to when in this 7-year period Jesus returns. Now, there are those that are what sometimes are referred to as people, they have a pre-tribulation view. or otherwise referred to perhaps as pre-tribulationists. And they believe that there will be a rapture of the church, which means that God is going to take out his believers out of the world around the time of the beginning of that 70th week, that 7-year period. Okay, we find this teaching for this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 to 18. Now, this is not when Jesus comes to the earth, and when he comes with his saints to intervene in the Battle of Armageddon. So this is not the same period. And that period actually comes at the end of the 7-year period, as described in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 5 to 10. So the second opinion is that this rapture will occur at the end of the 7-year period, and those that hold to this view are generally referred to as post-tribulationists. Now, there are a few other views in between and so on, but those are the main views really that we need to consider, or will consider today. Now, typically, but not exclusively, pre-tribulationists hold to the view that it is the wicked that will be removed at the end of that 7-year period, and it is the righteous that will be left to enter into what is known as the millennium. Now, the millennium is a 1,000-year period of time where Jesus will personally reign on the earth. In other words, the passage we are looking at is not referring to the rapture, and sometimes pre-tribulationists do think it's referring to the rapture, but it's not referring to the rapture, because that occurs around the beginning of the 7-year period. And to support the end of the 7-year argument, reference is made to this analogy about the days of Noah, where it was the wicked that were taken away by the flood, and it was the righteous that were saved. So the rapture of the church around the beginning of the 7-year period is not a judgment on the church. And so the church at the rapture will be taken away, but not in judgment. There is a judgment for the believer that will happen during that 7-year period, but it's not really a judgment. It's more an assessment of what one has done as a believer with one's life. It's not the judgment where there's condemnation that this particular passage in Matthew is talking about. So it's not a judgment, and because of the Noah analogy, we take it that the verses in question are related to judgment. Now, post-tribulationists, on the other hand, say that it is the righteous, not the wicked, that will be removed in the rapture come second coming. Now, they believe in a rapture, but they believe that the rapture is going to occur more or less at the same time as the second coming. So there's no time period in between, or virtually no time period between. It's going to be at the end of that 7-year period. The wicked will be left for judgment, but not all of them, according to their view. And herein is a problem for this view, because it is said that not all can be judged here, because some of the wicked must go into the millennium period, that 1,000-year period. Now, the reason for this is that in that millennial period there's going to be procreation. In other words, there are going to be babies that are going to be born at that time. And if the wicked are all taken away and judged, then who is it that's going to be entering into the millennial period to have babies? Because in the biblical teaching, the Bible tells us that those that have been translated, have gone to heaven, they're going to come back and they're going to be like the angels. And we find this in Luke chapter 20, verses 29 to 36. And the Bible tells us that angels don't procreate. So if the righteous are going to come back, they're not going to be going into the millennial period and having babies. So it can only be some of the wicked, according to the post-tribulation view, that are not judged, that go into that millennial period and then have babies. Okay, and that's a big problem at that time, of course. Now, the pre-tribulationists, on the other hand, say that some of the wicked on the earth in that period and this is while the church has been raptured or taken away, are with the Lord for that 7-year period. Okay, and so let me say that again to make it clear. So the church has been raptured, and the church at this time is the rapture's occurred at the beginning of that 7-year period, more or less, and they're away with the Lord, but there are going to be people left on the earth, and while the church is away with the Lord, some of those people are going to get saved. And the reason for that is that there's going to be the 144,000 that are going to be preaching, the 2 witnesses are going to be preaching, and who else, who knows, are going to be preaching at that point of time. And so we can then understand from that because of the preaching, some will be saved. And so we're going to have some that are saved, but that not been translated. They haven't been taken to heaven. And so they will, when it comes to the end of the 7-year period and the millennial period starts, they are the ones that are going to go, without being changed, they're going to go into that millennial period. And they're going to still be in their natural states. They're not going to have translated bodies. And so they're going to go in their natural state into that millennial period. And they are the ones, of course, that will then be able to have babies in fulfillment of that passage of Scripture from Isaiah that says that this is going to take place, Isaiah 11 verses 8 and 9. So we can conclude from the argument then that from the above arguments that it's the wicked that is going to be taken away at the end of that 7-year tribulation period and immediately before the commencement of the millennial kingdom. Now, however, if there's still any doubt lingering as to whether our text refers to the wicked that is being taken away, there's another passage of Scripture that we find that corroborates this position, and it's a parallel passage to our text, and it's found in Luke chapter 17 verses 34 to 37. And here the disciples are talking to Jesus, and they're asking Jesus this question because Jesus has given this explanation as to when these things will be and what it's going to be like. And so they're asking the question here, we find. And they say, well, where would they be taken? That's their question. And Jesus responds to that question by saying, quote, where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather, end quote. Okay. Now, clearly, this is not a reference to some blissful place that the people that have been taken to. They haven't been taken to heaven. Jesus was giving an analogy here, a parable, if you like. And he was saying the place where they have been taken to is where's the corpse, and the vultures are going to be gathering there. So clearly he is referring to not a good place. This is a place of judgment they are being taken to. It's not a place of bliss, not a place of heaven. So it supports the contention that I've been making, that it's the wicked that are going to be taken away, and it's not the righteous that are going to be taken away. Okay, so that's it, and I hope this has been of some interest to you and of some value, and until next time, see you later.